we have already discussed Weberian method. Okay. Weber contributed heavily to the development of substantive sociological theory and to the debate on methodology. Okay. Weber's methodological writings are usually characterized as effecting a reconciliation between positivism and or rather between positivist and Neo-Kantian positions. What is this positivism? As we have already discussed, we have discussed in the methods of science, there are various tenets of positivism that that science is distinct from all areas of human activity or creativity, because it possesses a method unique to it, that there is only one method common to all sciences irrespective of their subject matter, that is methodological monism, that the method of science is the method of induction, that is inductivism, that the hallmark of science lies in the fact that all scientific statements are systematically verifiable, that is systematic verifiability. There must be a dichotomy between fact and value. Facts do not have facts are value neutral, whereas values do not have factual content. Okay, we have discussed many tenets of positivism and how positivism emerged as an intellectual activity through different stages in the law of development of society propounded by Auguste Comte, that the transition which has taken place in the form of theological stage to metaphysical stage to positivistic or scientific stage. Okay? And then this is one part, supremacy of sciences over other sciences, other areas of inquiry. When we come to Neo-Kantianism, things differ. Okay? Kant in fact wrote a critique to pure reason. It was a substantive argument against the cognitive authority of science. Okay. Demarcation between, it was a challenge to the demarcation between science and non-science. It was a challenge. It was a challenge to the autonomy of science, to the cognitive authority of science. Okay. What Neo-Kantianism reflects on is that our world, our knowledge of the world, our image of the world is a constructed one. Our knowledge of the world, our image of the world is partial, it is relative. And perhaps for this reason, the way we try to conceptualize the existing world is subject to selection and interpretation. That is why fact and value, that what is a fact may not be fact later on, or what is a value may not remain at the level of value after a period of time. Okay. Then if our knowledge of the world, if our image of the world is a constructed one, is relatively partial, it is not a universal phenomenon which is subject to selection and interpretation from the multifarious and multifaceted data systems that we have. Okay. Weber tried to situate his methodological writings within social sciences as effecting a reconciliation between positivism on the one hand and Neo-Kantianism on the other. Weber tried to locate his methodology not simply as a matter of fact, the demarcation between science and non-science, but also as a matter of fact how science is limited in its purview, how we must go beyond such a linear model of science. Okay? That is what Neo-Kantianism is about. Okay? Though Weber's positions were not of course entirely consistent throughout his life, it is possible to say that in general he rejected the view attributable to some Neo-Kantians, though not recurred, that the cultural sciences are exclusively concerned with the uniqueness of their objects of study, and that the category of causality is inapplicable in them. Okay? The way positivists tried to look at causality, explanation, attributing a cause and effect relationship, okay, perhaps perhaps it cannot be attributable to cultural sciences. That is why there must be a difference between natural sciences and cultural sciences, okay, for Weber. Weber was committed to the widespread Neo-Kantian insistence on the methodological peculiarities of the cultural sciences. Then for Weber, these peculiarities centered around two related concepts, namely value relevance and interpretative understanding. One is value relevance and the other interpretative understanding. They should not be treated in isolation, they are mutually influenced, and any attempt to study them separately would be misleading. Okay? As positivists argued that no, there is no place of value in science, science is fact based. Okay? Neo-Kantians suggest that our knowledge of science, our knowledge of the world, social world, okay, is, as it is a constructed one, it also involves certain values as well as facts, and those values and facts, they are subject to interpretation. We tend to select certain facts, we tend to select certain values. Okay? In what sense? I mean, the cultural sciences differ from the natural in the distinctive role of valuations in the formation of concepts and in the distinctive type of knowledge involved in them. That is why if Weber's methodological and theoretical writings are a reconciliation between Positivism and Neo-Kantianism, then a third area of Weberian methodological or a third area of methodological differences was thought by Weber to be the use of idealizations in the cultural sciences. Okay? That is why it is very important to know these, that one is Positivism, the other Neo-Kantianism. Within Neo-Kantianism, we are trying to discuss value relevance, interpretative understanding of social action, and idealizations in the cultural sciences. Okay? Then Weber's famous definition of interpretative sociology encapsulates most of certain points. Most of the points, like sociology in the sense in which this highly ambiguous word is used here, is a science which attempts the interpretive understanding of social action in order thereby to arrive at a causal explanation of its course and effects. Then first, sociology is a science in the positivistic schema, okay, but that must move forward, okay, which attempts the interpretative understanding of social action, I mean, it goes to the Neo-Kantian school of thought. What does it aim to do? No, it aims to provide a causal explanation of its course and effects. That is why when Weber tried to look at sociology, okay, first of all, sociology is a science which attempts the interpretive understanding of social action in order thereby to arrive at a causal explanation of its course and effects. An exposition of Weber's methodological position can usefully proceed with an analysis of each of the concepts and contrasts involved in the definition. Okay. First, the concept of social action. The characterization of sociology in terms of the understanding and explanation of social action involves two important contrasts. Before getting into this, but what is that social action that we want to study? Okay. One is traditional social action. Traditional social action for Weber refers to the habits and customs that we generally are involved in. Okay. If we look at traditional social action, okay, traditional social action includes habits and customs. What is a habit? A habit is something that a human being has been, that an individual has been doing it for a long time usually. A habit is something that an individual gets accustomed to. Okay. Habits and customs that we see, they may have certain meanings, but for Weber they are unreflective in nature. Customs, if I say rituals, practices, which may be very unreflective in nature. Okay. For Weber, traditional social action, which is very much contingent upon habits and customs, okay, they are unreflective in nature and hence meaningless. Secondly, affective or emotive social action, if you look at, affective social action is based on emotions. For Weber, if affective social action is based on emotion, then it becomes meaningless, it becomes unreflective in nature. Then he discussed value rational social action. Okay? It must involve certain values which are higher ordered norms. Okay? They are reflective in nature and hence it involves meaningful social action. But the most important social action which Weber described, that is goal rational social action, goal oriented social action, or purposive social action, or instrumental rationality. Okay? It is such social action is oriented towards attaining certain objectives, attaining certain goals, and so on. Okay? Then when we discuss these four types of social action envisaged by Weber, okay, the characterization of sociology in terms of the understanding and explanation of social action. If I say that explanation is a part of positivistic thought process, then understanding is a part of Neo-Kantian thought process. Okay? Then such characterization, if I say positivism tends to arrive at explanation and Neo-Kantianism tends to arrive at understanding of social action, then they involve two important contrasts. First, Weber is distinguishing the paradigmatic objects of sociological knowledge. For him, what are those paradigmatic objects of sociological knowledge? Individual social actions, their meanings and causes from the supra-individual social entities, namely states, institutions, classes, collective consciousness, or whatever, whose existence is supposed in much sociological theorizing and also everyday thinking about social relations. Weber does not actually deny the existence of such entities, but argues that for interpretative sociology, they must be treated as solely the resultants and modes of organization of the particular acts of individual persons. Weber's positions here would now be regarded as methodological individualist, involving the claim that insofar as collectivities may be said to have characteristics independent of the individuals which make them up, those characteristics are to be explained in terms of individual actors and their actions. Okay? Then what is methodological, if I say methodological individualist position? Let us go one by one. I mean, one is paradigmatic objects of sociological knowledge, namely individual social actions, their meanings and causes. What are supra-individual social entities? If individual social actions, their meanings and causes, they constitute paradigmatic objects of sociological knowledge, then states, institutions, classes, collective consciousnesses, etc., they constitute supra-individual social entities. Okay? And Weber tried to mediate the two. Okay? And the way Weber does not actually deny the existence of such entities, but argues that for interpretative sociology, they must be treated as solely the resultants and modes of organization of the particular acts of individual persons. Weber's position here would now be regarded as methodological individualist, involving the claim that insofar as collectivities may be said to have characteristics independent of the individuals which make them up, those characteristics are to be explained in terms of individual actors and their subsequent actions. Then what is this methodological individualist position? Methodological individualism refers to theoretical positions holding that adequate sociological accounts necessarily involve reference to one, persons, I mean individuals, second, their interpretations, I mean those individuals' interpretations of their circumstances, thirdly, and the reasons and motives for the actions that they take. Then methodological individualism refers to theoretical positions holding that adequate sociological accounts must make reference to individuals, their interpretations of their circumstances and the causes and motives for the actions that they take. Weber says that such action by no means necessarily follows from the sharing of a common class situation. Okay? Then what are classes, common class situation when Weber suggested? Okay? When Weber suggested common class for suppose for Marx, classes are manifestations of economic differences. For Weber, class is based on life chances and causal components. Okay? And such interpretation involves or refers to a variety of forms of sociology united by an emphasis on the necessity for sociologists to grasp or understand or interpret actors' meanings. Such interpretive sociology can legitimately interpret course of action in terms of concepts such as the state, classes, class consciousness and so on, without commitment to any of the entities. Moreover, interpretative understanding refers to a method that emphasizes on the importance of understanding of intentional human action, purposive social action, goal rational social action. You can see this. Okay? I mean instrumental rationality. Semantically, any account is an interpretation. Weber considered understanding to be a method of elucidating the motivations for action which did not prelude the sociologist making generalizations from this data. For Weber used the term Verstehen to denote understanding. It is a German word, okay? Verstehen. I mean, the way Weber considered understanding or Verstehen to be a method of elucidating the motivations for action, which did not prelude the sociologist making generalizations from this data. In sum, in toto, whilst there is a general commitment to empathy and understanding from the actor's point of view, the research that follows the research that flows from interpretation is so varied as to be difficult to categorize as a school, possibly because the meaning of interpretation is itself subject to interpretation. For Weber, Verstehen or understanding is not a method at all, but an objective goal rational social action. I mean, if you have to understand, it must be an objective. You must have an objective to understand a social phenomenon. Okay? Verstehen or goal or Verstehen or understanding is not a method at all, but an objective or an achievement or a goal. It is a distinctive type of knowledge which may be achieved by a variety of methods or by no method at all. For Weber, the concept of Verstehen refers primarily to the spontaneous and immediate recognition of acts and their meanings in everyday life. Such interpretative understanding of social action, if you look at, okay, has two parts. One, interpretation of the textual and linguistic meaning of a cultural product, okay, and secondly, value interpretation, which does not involve evaluation of action or product, but involves selective conceptualization of the object in relation to some value, be it social value or aesthetic value or cognitive value. Okay. Then, if I say social value, aesthetic value and cognitive value, then I am trying to make some selection. For Weber, selection is based on cultural relevance. We have already discussed this. Value for a sociologist is always an object of study. Weber divides interpretative understanding into two parts, namely direct understanding and indirect understanding. Direct understanding is alternatively known as observational understanding, whereas indirect understanding is alternatively known as explanatory understanding. Direct understanding is based on the interpretative understanding of action. It involves a method or a strategy, that is imaginative identification, primarily to be spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and their meanings in everyday life. And this imaginative identification is processed through rule governed strategy within a shared culture. It is possible only when both observer and observed share culture. Rule governed shared culture is based on three things. One is relevance, secondly acceptability, and thirdly elegance. If observer and observed do not share culture, then observer may give a different meaning, or observed should get socialized into the culture that the observer wants to study. Then if I say rule governed shared culture, but what is culture? Weber defines culture as the totality of real objects to which we attach generally acknowledged values or complexes of meaning constituted by values. Culture, in addition, consists of all those items produced by human beings for the sake of value ends. Okay? If you look at such interpretative understanding of social action vis-a-vis culture, because we do not interpret a particular phenomenon independent of our cultural setup. Okay? Culture is very important when we make interpretation. That is why understanding comprises two things. One, imaginative identification, that we have already discussed, that imaginative identification is primarily spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and their meanings in everyday life. Okay? Such imaginative identification is a useful tool, but it is not an essential condition for meaningful social action. And recognition of the rational connection between means and ends. Okay? Such indirect or explanatory understanding of social action involves two things. Explanation. One, explanation must be adequate at the level of meaning. Secondly, explanation must be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations. If I say explanation must be adequate at the level of meaning, okay, then it follows from the Neo-Kantian school of thought. If I say explanation must be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations, then it flows from the positivistic school of thought. Okay? That is why Weber said indirect or explanatory understanding involves two things. One, explanation must be adequate at the level of meaning. Secondly, explanation must be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations. Okay? Then to what extent explanation must be adequate? Such adequacy is based on generalizations, and generalizations are based on experience. There is a probability that a particular action always occurs in the same way. If motives are the antecedent, then social action will be the consequent. Weber defines motive as a complex subjective meaning, not objective. Motives are always subjective, because your motive may be different from my motive, right? Okay? Motives are always subjective. Weber defines motive as a complex subjective meaning which seems to the actor, herself or himself, or to the observer as an adequate ground for the conduct in question. Multiple motives can lead to a similar or same kind of social action. In fact, there are obviously today if we look at, there are many models of explanation. Suppose earlier Durkheim said monocausal model, that is single cause single effect model, but for Weber it is a multiple causes single effect model. Okay? But now we see in the 21st century that it is always about multiple causes multiple effects model. Okay? But for Weber it was always multiple causes single effect model. I mean, multiple motives can lead to a similar or same kind of social action. However, the central dimensions of Weber are that economic, religious and power relations are crucial sociological explanations. Weber made three types of economic phenomena. Economic phenomena, it's very important in methodology, methodology in social sciences, to discuss Weber. Economic, religious and power relations are crucial sociological explanations. When we say he made three types of economic phenomena, one is economic phenomena, secondly economically relevant phenomena, and thirdly economically conditioned phenomena. If I say, when Weber said economic phenomena, he referred to institutions deliberately created and used for economic ends. Suppose market. Economically relevant phenomena, those legal and religious phenomena which are not primarily economic, but have consequences which are economic in nature in certain circumstances. Economically conditioned phenomena, when we say, these are stratification systems and the state are not directly the economic phenomena, but they are affected in some way by economic phenomena. The state also is directed by the market, directed by various stratificatory systems. That is why for Weber, economy and religion cannot be separated in our day to day life, and so on. For this, he was not referring to such relationship independent of the structure of polity, economy and culture, okay, and the kind of authority that we have. The structure of authority in Weberian schema, that is the traditional authority, rational legal authority and charismatic authority. Okay. He was trying to look at the structure of bureaucracy to examine the structure of authority. Okay. Traditional authority, when Weber referred to all religious institutions, but when he referred to rational legal authority, he was referring to the state, okay, the kind of present day bureaucracy that we have, and charismatic authority that he was referring to maybe authority. In fact, Robert Bierstedt alternatively used the term leadership in the place of charismatic authority. That if you look at charismatic authority, maybe Gandhi, maybe Mandela, Nelson Mandela and so on, okay. Martin Luther King, okay. Many, but the kind of rational legal authority which is operational, it is an ideal typical bureaucratic setup, okay, that Weber was referring to. If we look at Merton's structural, I mean from this what follows Merton's structural functional model, okay, then Merton's structural functional model, and then we will discuss the kind of manifest and latent functions that which are very much seen in the context of Merton, that functions are observed consequences which make for the adaptation or adjustment of a given system for positive consequences. When Merton was referring to dysfunction, okay, one social fact can have negative consequences for another social fact. When Merton was trying to refer to non-functions, I mean he was trying to refer to consequences that are irrelevant to the system under consideration. Okay. Then Mertonian structural functional model, okay, involves three types of things. One is function, second dysfunction, third non-function. Functions are those observed consequences which make for the adaptation or adjustment of a given system or positive consequences. Dysfunction, that is one social fact which can have negative consequences for another social fact, and non-function refer to the consequences which are irrelevant to the system under consideration. That is why when we look at the kind of functions and consequences, okay, now for Merton, I mean Merton always referred to manifest functions and latent functions. Manifest functions are those where we see both subjective dispositions and objective consequences coincide, whereas in the context of latent functions, subjective dispositions and objective consequences do not coincide. Okay. In the context of Hopi tribe, Merton looked at this. In the context of many culturally mediated symbols, we can discuss these things. Then what have we discussed so far? We have discussed the Matthew effect in science, I mean as a part of inequalities in science, then Weberian interpretative method, okay, different types of social action, structure of authority in Weberian schema, which influenced structure of Mertonian structural functional model, okay, and he also Merton reflected on manifest and latent functions elaborately. Okay. Merton also discussed the theories of middle range and so on, but this is not a part of this course structure. It is important to understand manifest and latent functions of Merton in in specific cultural contexts, in specific cultural circumstances of science. Okay? And then from here onward, if we say that the kind of instrumental rationality, okay, the kind of value rational social action, the kind of authority that we have, okay, in terms of rational legal authority, traditional authority or charismatic authority, or the kind of Mertonian structural functional model that we have, functions, dysfunctions, non-functions, and then in terms of manifest and latent functions, I mean in manifest functions we have intended or anticipated consequences of social action. In latent functions we have unintended or unanticipated social action, so consequences of social action. Okay. From here onward, what kind of intended and unintended consequences of social action that we have so far as the relationship between technology and politics is concerned. This is very important.